Australia, a place known for things that want to kill you: sharks, spiders, snakes, and apparently curbs at turn 6. Because before a single wheel had turned at the 2026 season opener, Oscar Piastri, the local hero, the hometown favorite, the man the entire crowd at Melbourne had turned up to cheer, drove over a curb on his reconnaissance lap and went home, not retired from the race, not DNF'd. He didn't even start. Welcome to Formula One 2026, where the drama begins even before the lights go out.
Perez goes off the track, off goes Leclerc, through goes Hamilton!
I'm Akshay, and this is the art of motor racing. And today, we're breaking down the entire Australian Grand Prix weekend: practice, qualifying, the race, and everything in between. So, before we dive in, a little context, because 2026 isn't just a new season, it's an entirely new era of Formula One. New technical regulations have overhauled everything: new aerodynamic philosophy, new power unit architecture, new energy deployment systems. Every team essentially started from a blank sheet of paper. Hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of engineering hours, and on top of that, there are two brand new teams on the grid: Cadillac, the American manufacturer, making their Formula One debut, and Audi, who have taken over the old Kick Sauber entry. 11 teams, 22 drivers, an entirely new rulebook. Oh, and there's a fresh face on the grid: Arvid Lindblad, the 18-year-old Brit. Stepping into Racing Bulls, everyone wants to know how he'll handle his first race weekend. He did fantastic. So, new cars, new teams, new regulations. Formula One chose Albert Park in Melbourne to unveil all of it. What could possibly go wrong? Friday morning, FP1. Formula One's first proper look at the new 2026 cars. The session was immediately eventful. For all the wrong reasons. Fernando Alonso didn't even make it to the track. Aston Martin had suspected a power unit issue and simply kept him in. His teammate Lance Stroll went out, but managed only 3 laps before he too was called in. 2 cars, effectively zero meaningful data. Fernando Alonso would like you to know he's a 2-time world champion who has raced over 2 decades, and he simply spent his Friday watching. Elsewhere, Arvid Lindblad, in his very first Formula One practice session, stopped just outside the pit lane with a power problem, triggering yellow flags while marshals wheeled in his car. Sergio Perez spun into the runoff at turn 4 after locking up and flat spotting his tires on Cadillac's debut. And Alex Albon, he pulled over between turns 10 and 11, having lost power steering and, by the sounds of his radio, everything else too. Lando Norris, the reigning world champion, he climbed out of his McLaren midway through due to some precautionary measures for his gearbox and sending him early to lunch. Meanwhile, who topped FP1? Ferrari. Charles Leclerc went fastest, Lewis Hamilton second, and Verstappen third. The Scuderia looked sharp, the car looked planted, and Ferrari fans around the world allowed themselves one cautious collective exhale. And Lindblad, once he got going again, 5th on his very first Formula One practice session. Half the paddock quietly raised their eyebrows. Now, before we get too excited about Ferraris, this is Friday practice. This is where teams run mystery fuel loads, experimental setups, and occasionally deliberate sandbagging. Ferrari topping FP1 has historically meant as much as the weather forecast in Melbourne. FP2, Friday afternoon. And it's here the picture starts to shift. Piastri, the home hero, topped the session. The crowd loved it. McLaren looked genuinely quick. Antonelli and Russell were second and third for Mercedes. But here's the thing that caught the analysts' attention. While the lap time showed Piastri ahead, Mercedes' long run pace, the stuff that actually matters on the race day, looked frighteningly strong. Verstappen stalled in the pit lane trying to get going. His team had to rescue him and wheel the car back to the garage before he could join the session. Lindblad was 8th again, quietly impressive for a first day in Formula One. And then, with 10 minutes to go, Verstappen suffered a huge snap of oversteer at turn 10, damaging the floor as he took a trip through the gravel. Not ideal. The worrying signs: Aston Martin, Alonso and Stroll both managed only minimal laps. Power unit misery from FP1 had carried straight into the afternoon. And Carlos Sainz at Williams was already having reliability headaches of his own, managing just 10 laps before returning to the garage with unknown issues. But the headline from Friday, if you read between the lines, was Mercedes hadn't really shown their hand yet. The race pace data suggested they were sitting on something. But the question, how much? Saturday morning, FP3. The last hour of practice before qualifying. Session where you want, above all else, to keep your car in one piece. It started late. A crash in F3 race required barriers to repair, pushing the session back by 20 minutes. And then, almost immediately after the green lights, Carlos Sainz William ground to a halt near the pit entry at the very first lap. Red flag. Session stopped before it even had begun. Lance Stroll, meanwhile, didn't participate at all. Aston Martin confirmed an ICE issue that kept him out. For a team already in crisis, that was another hammer blow. Once things got going properly, Russell eventually topped the session with a stunning late lap. 6 tenths faster than Hamilton, 7 tenths up on Leclerc. That gap is not normal. That gap is a problem for everyone not driving the silver car. And then, just minutes of the session remaining, Kimi Antonelli began a quick lap. Got to turn 2, clipped the curb on the outside, and the rear snapped away, planting the Mercedes into the barriers at a significant force. He walked away unhurt. The car did not. Mercedes' garage had less than 2 hours to rebuild the car before qualifying. Some teams would have packed it and started planning for Sunday. Mercedes apparently told their engineers, "We'll see you in Q1." The stage was set for a very chaotic qualifying session. Nobody could have predicted quite how chaotic. Qualifying, Saturday afternoon, and it begins with uncertainty. Will Antonelli make it? Mercedes is still rebuilding the car in the garage. Nobody knows if they'll make it. Russell goes out and immediately puts himself at the top of the timesheet by a significant margin. Mercedes is simply in a different postcode to everyone else on a one-lap pace. That is not a confidence-inspiring sight if you are in any of the other 20 cars. And then Max Verstappen, 4-time world champion, the man who dominated this sport from 2021 to 2024 with ruthless metronomic consistency. His first flying lap of Q1, he brakes for turn 1 and the rear axle locks and he spins directly into the barrier. In Q1, gone on lap 1. He got on the radio with the economy of language that only a man who has won 4 world titles can achieve, said, "The Car just fucking locked up on the rear axle. Fantastic. Verstappen, Alonso, both Cadillac drivers, Perez and Valtteri were all eliminated. Sainz and Stroll didn't even make it to the session. Meanwhile, Antonelli, with his freshly repaired Mercedes, made it out of the garage with just minutes to spare, set a time, and made it through Q1. The Verstappen crash actually handed Mercedes a red flag, buying the team extra precious minutes to complete repairs. Sometimes Formula One gives you gifts wrapped in chaos. That is either a testament to Mercedes' engineering department or evidence that Russell is so fast right now that even a half repaired car driven by his teammate is second quickest. Possibly both. Q2, more of the same from Russell, more evidence that Mercedes have arrived in this new era considerably better than the rest. A notable subplot: Lindblad made it through to Q3, rookie in his first ever qualifying session, going to the top 10 shootout for pole position, worth noting. In Q2, Hamilton found himself down in 16th after a mistake on his first run. His team told him to pit for fresh tires and he had to fight his way back into the top 10 to make it to Q3. He managed it, but barely. Meanwhile, Lewis having a near elimination moment in Q2 is not the headlines anyone at Ferrari would have wanted. Q3, the top 10 shootout for pole position. And before a flying lap had even been set, chaos. Mercedes released Antonelli's car with cooling fans still attached. The kind of fans that are used between sessions to keep the car at temperature. One piece flew in at turn 1 braking zone, another landed on the straight approaching turn 3. Lando Norris, he drove directly over it. The session was immediately red flagged. Mercedes were fined for releasing the car in unsafe condition. And yet, none of it mattered. Russell's final lap, a 1 minute 18.5, was untouchable. Antonelli second, Isaac Hadjar third for Red Bull, which was at least something for Red Bull after Verstappen's disaster. Leclerc fourth, Piastri fifth, Norris sixth, and Hamilton seventh. Russell on pole, Mercedes on the front row. The new era had declared its early favorite. Sunday, race day. 8,000 people in grandstand, most of them wearing orange for Piastri. The new 5-second blue light countdown procedure replaced the traditional lights out sequence, which sounds like something they'd use at a school talent show, but Formula One is nothing if not committed to a change for its own sake. Drivers head out on their reconnaissance lap. Piastri waves to the crowd roars. It's a lovely moment, and then he hits a curb, the suspension loads up, something breaks, and the McLaren stops, right there on the reconnaissance lap, before the race had started. McLaren later revealed a suspension component had failed. Kind of thing that would have been completely invisible in practice or qualifying, but chose, with spectacular timing, the single worst moment in the entire weekend to let go. Piastri climbed out of the car in front of his home crowd, didn't race, didn't even go to the grid. And he wasn't alone. Nico Hulkenberg's Audi ground to a halt entering the final corner on his own lap to the grid. A power unit failure before the race had even started. 2 cars gone before a single lap was completed. The stewards cleared both cars, 20 drivers lined up on the grid, and the race had already produced enough drama before the full season even began. Lights out, and Charles Leclerc is absolutely electric. From 4th on the grid, he gets a launch that makes the rest of the field look like they're reversing. He's past Russell, past Antonelli, past everyone, driving to the inside and leading the 2026 season opener before the first corner even finished. The crowd erupts, the tifosi around the world erupts. Even people who don't like Ferrari are momentarily impressed. Hamilton tries to follow his teammate though, He's right there, right on Leclerc's gearbox, scenting the same opportunity, but he gets squeezed onto the grass, loses momentum, and has to settle for the third. So close, so astonishingly close to a Ferrari 1-2 on lap 1. Russell, meanwhile, gets a poor start from pole. The Mercedes is bogging slightly off the line, finds himself shuffled back to second. Hajar is an impressive fourth for Red Bull, and Antonelli is seventh. Mercedes had almost no battery in the opening lap, leaving him to fend off for himself with no power deployment just when he needed the most. From front row to seventh on the opening straight. That is a very rough way to begin the race. So, the order at the end of lap 1: Leclerc, Russell, Hamilton, Hajar, and a very unhappy Antonelli trying to work where his race had just gone. There's a saying in Formula One that races are won and lost in the pit lanes, not on the track. Ferrari were about to prove this most painful way imaginable. But for now, lap after lap, Leclerc was holding it together at the front. The Tifosi had their phones out, ready to text their friends. It was looking good. And here is where the race pivoted. Two virtual safety cars were called during the race. Quick explainer for anyone new to this. A VSC slows all cars down to a fixed delta time. The pit lane stays open, and crucially, pit stops taken under VSC conditions cost far less than stops under normal green flag racing. It's as close to a free tire change as Formula One gets. Virtual safety car number 1, lap 11. Hajar's Red Bull had just blown up spectacularly and parked on the grass. The VSC board comes out. Norris pits, Russell pits, Antonelli pits, half the field pits, fresh rubber, minimal time loss, sorted. Ferrari sends their mechanic to the pit wall. They are ready, they're waiting, and then the VSC period ends. Ferrari were too slow to pull the trigger. Racing resumed before either Leclerc or Hamilton could come in. Hamilton got on the radio immediately, said at least one of us should have come in. Hard to argue with that, but Formula One is nothing if not generous. A second chance appeared on lap 18. Valtteri Bottas. Cadillac crawls to a halt. Right at the pit lane entry. Another VSC, another window. This time, Ferrari hesitated again, and by the time they decided to act, the pit lane entry had been closed. The race director had shut it on safety grounds because Bottas's car was sitting right at the entry point, blocking the way in. Lindblad, Verstappen, and Berman all just got in before the closure. Ferrari got nothing. So that was it. 2 VSC windows. One missed because Ferrari were too slow to react. One missed because the pit lane literally closed on them. You can be unlucky in one of those. The other one is on the pit wall. Leclerc eventually pitted on lap 25 under green flag conditions. Hamilton on lap 28, both losing times enormously to Mercedes. Russell and Antonelli on tires that were already 8 to 12 laps fresher were immovable. The race was over. Russell first, Antonelli second, Leclerc third, Hamilton fourth. Just 6 tenths behind his teammate at the flag, which tells you how quick the Ferrari could actually be. But quick and smart are two different things. Elsewhere in the race, Lando Norris, the reigning world champion defending his title, finished fifth. Now, fifth isn't exactly a disaster, but in a McLaren that had shown genuine pace all weekend, and with Piastri having not even started, fifth is kind of a result that quietly sends a message. They haven't quite found it yet. And then there's Max Verstappen, starting P20, dead last on the grid after his Q1 qualifying crash, in a car that had been showing all the mechanical reliabilities of a vintage toaster all weekend. He drove through the entire field and finished sixth. 2 pit stops, hard tires, and sheer bloody mindedness. By the closing lap, he had his Red Bull right on the back of Norris' McLaren, hunting him down. Norris held on, but only just. For a man who started last, sixth place is either an impressive recovery or a damning indictment of how uncompetitive the Red Bull actually was. Possibly both, which is depending on how you look at it. Either a masterclass in damage limitation or a reminder that Verstappen in a car that doesn't want to go fast is still better than most people in a car that does. Hajar, who had qualified an impressive third for Red Bull, unfortunately retired during the race. So the rest of the honors went to Ollie Berman in seventh for Haas, an excellent result for the young Brit. Behind him, Lindblad brought his Racing Bulls home in eighth in the points in his first ever Formula One race. Impressive. Bortoletto ninth for Audi's debut, and Gasly 10th, completing the top 10. For Lindblad, 8th on debut is a genuinely excellent result. Keep that name in mind. So, what do we actually take away from Melbourne? First and most importantly, Mercedes are back. Not showing signs of promise back, not could be competitive by mid season back. They won race 1 in the new era from pole position with a 1-2 finish. They did it by being faster in qualifying and smarter in strategy. That is a complete performance. Every other team need to take that seriously. Second, Ferrari pace is real. Unfortunately, their strategy is not. Leclerc and Hamilton were legitimately quick all weekend. FP1, qualifying, and the race start. The car is fast, but being fast and smart are two different things. Right now, Ferrari are just one of them. This is not a new problem, but it is a recurring one, and that kind of thing that turns competitive machinery into fourth place finish. Third, Kimi Antonelli. Yes, he crashed in practice. Yes, his car nearly didn't make it to qualifying. Yes, there were pit lane investigations. Yet, he still qualified second, raced cleanly, and finished second in just his second Formula One season. He is 19 years old. That is not a fluke. Fourth, Red Bull looked genuinely uncertain. Verstappen won 4 championships with a car that felt like an extension of himself. The RB22 doesn't feel like that. Whether that changes as the season develops, we'll see, but for now, the 4-time world champion is crashing in Q1 due to a software glitch, starting last and needing a heroic recovery drive just to reach the points. That's not the Verstappen we know. And that's the 2026 Australian Grand Prix, season opener that delivered more storylines than most races managed to do in the entire season. A dominant Mercedes, a Ferrari own goal, a 4-time world champion in damage limitation mode, a teenager scoring points on debut, and yes, Oscar Piastri, who would like you to know that he was technically present in Melbourne, just briefly on a reconnaissance lap and facing the wrong direction. And if you've made this far, you already know what to do. Subscribe to the Art of Motor Racing. We've got every race covered this season. Drop a comment below. Who do you think challenges Mercedes first? Ferrari, Red Bull, or McLaren? I'm Akshay, and I'll see you at Shanghai.